Alright, pull up a chair, everybody. Because if your name happens to be Claressa Shields this week, I promise you, you are not sleeping easy tonight. The bed is spinning. The phone will not stop lighting up. The comment sections have turned into a war room. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, Claressa Shields is realizing that the whole fairy tale story she has been selling to the internet for months just got taken apart on live television by one woman, in one sitting, with a microphone and a mood. That woman is Remy Ma. And listen close, because I promise you, what Remy Ma just did is not a diss. It is not a subtweet. It is not a shady caption on Instagram. It is a demolition. A full, controlled, professional demolition of a bubble that Claressa Shields has been floating around inside of like it was oxygen. So sit down for a second, because we are diving in. And I want to warn you up front, if you came here for the sanitized version, this is not the video. Because everything the culture has been dancing around, everything the interviewers were too scared to ask, everything the little corner blog commentators keep skating past, I am about to lay it flat on the table. Word going around the culture is that Papoose has not just been dragging his feet on this divorce. Papoose has been actively, deliberately, quietly stalling it. Not because he loves his ex. Not because he is confused. Not because he does not know what he wants. But because as long as that paperwork is not finalized, Claressa Shields cannot walk down any aisle. And that family is the entire storyline the Bronx Queen just yanked out into the daylight. Now before somebody in the comments jumps in with the whole, "You always taking Remy Ma's sideline," let me stop you right there. Because this has nothing to do with picking a team. This has to do with reading a room. And the room is telling us, loud and clear, that the culture has spoken. Nobody, and I do mean nobody, is standing in front of what this boxer has been out here doing. The people have watched. The people have heard. The people have taken notes. And the verdict came in a long time ago. Nobody is riding for this. Let me set the scene. Because for the people just tuning in, here is the paper trail as it sits right now. Remy Ma steps up to a microphone. Remy Ma opens her mouth. Remy Ma does exactly what she promised she would do the last time somebody in Papoose's new circle put their mouth on her name. She said, plain as day, if his new little chapter kept trying to speak to her, she would take that stage and drag him from wall to wall. And that is not me embellishing. That is what she said. And this past Sunday, she put her word into action. She dragged the man all the way across that stage. She talked about the money. She talked about the 20%. She talked about the household bills he allegedly wasn't paying. She talked about the fact that when the divorce shakes out, he thinks he is walking away with half of a fortune he did not build. She said it was clean. She said it with receipts in her tone. And then she did what a lot of women in her position never do. She said her ex's name out loud, on the record, on stage. That is when the whole equation shifted. Because up until that moment, Claressa Shields was floating. She had her little narrative going. She had convinced herself and a small audience of enablers that this was a love story. That this was a soft launch into a new chapter. That the veteran lyricist was walking away from a marriage because he had found something better. And Remy Ma? In this delusion, Remy Ma was supposed to be the bitter chapter fading into the background. Except that is not the story. That has never been the story. And the moment the MC opened her mouth on that stage, her rival realized the story she had been telling herself was a lie the whole time. And what did she do? What did Claressa Shields do the second the bubble popped? She did what every person in history has done when the mirror shows them something they cannot stand to see. She grabbed the nearest, easiest target and started swinging. And the target she picked, the woman she chose to launch her distraction campaign against, was Shenica. A woman who did nothing but ask a question. A woman who, out of respect and out of sisterhood, tried to give the champion the same gentle warning any decent friend would have given. A woman who has been called royalty by the very culture Claressa Shields is trying to muscle her way into. Somebody explain to me, in what universe does an Olympic medalist get to speak to a woman like Shenica in that tone? In what universe does she get to open her mouth about a woman that the entire ATL, the entire hip-hop generation, and the entire commentary space respects? Because that is not a scuff. That is not a light jab. That is a public tantrum aimed at royalty by somebody who thinks she has the range to swing. She does not have the range. She has never had the range. And the second she tried it, the whole culture pulled up. Eva Marcille pulled up. Eva Marcille, who does not step into every little internet skirmish, took the microphone and said, in the calmest, most educated tone possible, dial it back. You are not doing this. You are not going to sit here and dress up your jealousy as commentary. You are not going to disguise your panic as journalism. You had the entire opportunity on the actual radio show with a live microphone to say all of this to the woman's face. And you did not. You went home. You sat on it. You waited. And now, only after Remy Ma detonated your whole fantasy, you want to come outside swinging at Shenica? Miss Eva Marcille clocked that in real time. And that is why the culture stood up and clapped. Because here is the truth. And this is the part one want you to sit with. Claressa Shields is not upset with Shenica because of the question. Claressa Shields is upset with her because that question is the domino that made the Bronx legend speak. And Remy Ma speaking is the last thing on earth our champion wanted to happen. The MC had already warned this man. She had been sitting in silence, on purpose, letting the situation cook itself. And she had made one thing crystal clear: if the new arrangement kept putting her name in their mouth, she would drop the whole ledger. Well, Shenica asked the question. Papoose's little corner of the story tried to answer it. And the MC kept her word. And now the boxer wants to act like Shenica is the villain? Family, this is textbook redirection. This is what people do when the actual bombshell is too heavy to carry, so they lob a smaller grenade in a different direction and pray the culture chases the noise. It is not working. It has not worked. It is not going to work. Because the culture is not stupid. The culture sees the play. And the culture is telling Claressa Shields, very politely, to sit down. Now let me talk about who our new agitator is talking down to, because this part matters. Shenica is not somebody the boxer gets to swing at. Shenica is somebody who came up the long way, the humble way, the correct way. And when I say humble, I do not mean small, I mean earned. Shenica did not walk into any room she had not already paid for. Shenica did not have to slide into anybody's DMs asking for a favor. Shenica is her own currency. And for our champion to come out of her mouth calling this woman all sorts of names, bringing up things that are not verified, dragging in accusations that do not add up, painting this beautiful, established, respected woman as some kind of villain because she asked a single, calm, decent question, that is Claressa Shields telling on herself. That is Claressa Shields showing the world exactly who she is when the pressure hits. And here is the piece that everybody keeps skipping. Remember, before all of this, the Flint fighter was in Remy Ma's DMs. Yes, that is not a rumor. That is on the record. The Olympic gold medalist, world champion, was in another woman's DMs playing friend. Playing sister. Playing, can you help me with this project? Can you point me toward this connection? Can you put me in this room? And Remy Ma, being the woman that she is, treated her with grace. Treated her like a peer. Treated her like somebody trying to grow. And what did the boxer do with that access? She used it as a map. She used it as reconnaissance. She used the woman's kindness as a stepping stone toward the woman's husband. That is what the paper trail says. That is what the timeline shows. And no amount of press-run distraction is going to reroute that fact. Now let us talk about the piece the Bronx Queen dropped on Sunday, because this is where the whole thing turned into an earthquake. Remy Ma got on that stage and said, in plain English, that when the day comes for her to walk away single, she is walking away single with everything she built. Because half of it? He is not getting half of it. She said it with the same cadence she uses on a track. She said it like she had been holding it for months. And then she went further. She used his actual name. She said the words. She talked about how Papoose is out here telling the internet he wants to help people, when the receipts show he could barely help himself when the household bills came due. She said, Papoose, help yourself. And the internet lost its whole mind. Because that one line, Papoose, help yourself, is the entire thesis of this story. That is the sentence that made a certain phone start buzzing off the nightstand. That is the sentence that made the group chats explode. That is the sentence that reframed the entire narrative. Because if the veteran MC is out here running a public image as a helper, a mentor, a savior, and his own ex-wife is on record saying he could not even carry his half of the household, what exactly is he offering his new companion? What exactly does she think she is signing up for? What exactly is the marriage plan built on top of? That is when the bubble popped. And the second it popped, Claressa Shields realized something even worse. She realized that Papoose had been stalling. On purpose. Stalling the divorce. Stalling the paperwork. Stalling the finalization. Not because he loves his ex. Not because he is confused. But because, and this is the piece that has the whole culture in an uproar, Papoose does not actually want to walk into a marriage with her. He does not want to be locked into her expectations. He does not want to face what marrying an Olympic gold medalist would demand of him. So he does the math. And the math tells him, as long as the paperwork stays unfinished, he does not have to say yes to anything. He does not have to commit to anything. He gets to enjoy the softness of the new arrangement without any of the weight of the covenant. And Remy Ma just walked up to a microphone and told the world exactly that. That is why our Flint boxer is losing it. That is why she is out here calling women names. That is why she is grabbing at Shenica's ankles, trying to pull somebody, anybody, down into the mud with her. Because the alternative is standing in the mirror and admitting that the man she reorganized her whole life around does not actually want the version of the future she has been sketching out in her head. And listen, the Bronx legend said something in one of those earlier moments that has been sitting with me. She said, and I am paraphrasing, that nobody falls in love faster than a person with nowhere else to be. Read that again. Nobody falls in love faster than a person with nowhere else to be. That is the whole diagnosis. That is the whole prescription. That is the entire book on one page. Because when the veteran lyricist slid into this new chapter, he was not walking into a great romance. He was walking into a landing pad. He needed somewhere to be. He needed a cushion. He needed a bed and a warm plate and a next chapter. And the boxer, for reasons only she can answer, decided to be all three of those things at once. And now that the MC has said the quiet part out loud, Claressa Shields is stuck in the most humiliating position a person can be in. She is fighting for a man who is not fighting for her. She is defending a version of the story that has already been debunked on live television. She is calling out a woman like Shenica to distract from the truth that a woman like Remy Ma already laid on the table with a bow. Let me sit with this for a second, because I think it is important. When the Bronx Queen was married to Papoose, she was giving him 20% as her manager. 20% of her earnings, of her tours, of her checks. And what did he contribute to the household bills during that entire arrangement? According to what she said out loud, on record, very little. Very, very little. So the arrangement, when you strip the romance out of it, was she builds the empire, he gets a percentage of the empire, and the empire pays for the roof he sleeps under. That is the deal that was in place. And now this man is out here believing he is entitled to half of what she has built. Family. Family. Do you hear yourselves? That is what the MC torched on stage. That is the bubble the champion was floating inside of. And the reason she is out here spinning is because that bubble was not just a bubble, it was the whole structure. Take that structure away, and everything else the boxer has been telling herself starts to collapse. Now here is the part where I have to talk about the culture as a whole. Because it is not lost on me that the champion chose Shenica as her target. It is not lost on any of us. Because Shenica is a melanated woman. Shenica is a beautiful, accomplished, deeply respected melanated woman. And our Flint fighter, herself a melanated woman, herself a champion, herself somebody the community rallied around for years, decided to take that energy and aim it sideways. At another sister. Publicly. Loudly. Nastily. And that, family, is a choice. That is not a slip. That is not a heat-of-the-moment moment. That is a decision to disrespect a woman who did nothing to her. And every woman in the culture is watching. Every woman is taking notes. Every woman is remembering. Because this boxer will need this community again one day. She will need the same woman she is out here dragging. She will need the same commentary space she is out here insulting. She will need the same royalty she is out here trying to knock off the throne. And when that day comes, the culture is going to remember exactly who she was during this chapter. Now, some folks online want to argue that maybe this whole outburst is just a legitimate reaction. Maybe she really does feel some kind of way about the veteran interviewer. Hear me out. Even if that were true, and I do not believe it is, even if it were true, it still would not excuse this behavior. Because grown women, especially grown women with public platforms, do not go around dragging other women through the mud over a single question asked in a professional setting. Grown women handle disagreements privately, calmly, and with respect. What Claressa Shields did is a tantrum. And tantrums are for people who have run out of arguments. And she has run out of arguments. Because the receipts are not on her side. The paper trail is not on her side. The timeline is not on her side. And the woman she has been quietly modeling herself after this entire time just laid it all out on a stage. Which brings me to the wildest layer of this whole story. And I want you to sit with this one. Because when Remy Ma dropped that verse, the one where she references the same bar from Cardi B, the one about how these women want me to speak on them, but you cannot flex on something I already had, the internet noticed something. That same bar. The same exact section of that same exact song. popped up on the boxer's Instagram story a few hours later. Same lyrics. Same section. Same beat. Almost like a copy-paste. Almost like a student trying to catch up with a teacher. And that family is the tell. Because our fighter is not just fighting Remy Ma. She is studying. She is trying to become her. She is trying to move like her. And every time she tries, she falls short. Every single time. That is the tragedy of this whole situation. Claressa Shields could have been anything she wanted to be. She has an Olympic gold medal. She has a world championship. She has a platform. She has a story. She has genuine, undeniable, hard-earned talent. And instead of leaning into any of that, instead of using this chapter of her life to elevate her brand, she has decided to bet the entire house on being the sequel to a woman she cannot outright. Remy Ma is not the villain of the story. Remy Ma is the author. And her rival is trying to write herself into a chapter that was closed before she picked up the pen. Now here is where I want to stop and give something real. Because I do not want any of this to sound like I am piling on for the sake of piling on. Our champion is a human being. She has accomplishments that should be untouchable. But when a person takes their accomplishments and uses them as a shield to justify indefensible behavior, the culture has to step in. And the culture is stepping in. Not with cruelty. Not with mockery. But with a clear, firm message. Sit down. Reassess. Log off. And rebuild. Because right now, Claressa Shields is doing more damage to Claressa Shields than any critic ever could. She is undoing years of her own reputation. She is trading in credibility she spent a decade earning. She is torching a legacy for a man who, according to the actual receipts on the actual table, is not even fully committing to her. Somebody explain to me, in what universe does that math work? Because from where I am sitting, it does not. Let me bring us back to the ex-husband piece. Because I do not want him to get lost in this. He is not an innocent party. He is not a neutral observer. He is not the man who accidentally ended up in the middle of two women's dramas. Papoose is the architect of this entire mess. Papoose is the one who allegedly stalled the paperwork. Papoose is the one who allegedly let his new companion believe things that were not true. Papoose is the one who has been running a public image as the good man, the loyal man, the community man, while the paper trail behind him tells a very different story. And Remy Ma just tore that image up on live television. Because here is what nobody wants to say. If Papoose was truly ready to walk away from his marriage, that divorce would have been finalized months ago. It would have been done. Signed, sealed, filed, done. Divorces do not take this long when both parties are motivated. And the reason this one has stretched out is not because the Bronx MC is holding on. She is not holding on to anything. She is moving forward. She is writing books, making music, running businesses, raising her children, and as of Sunday, publicly reclaiming her narrative. The person who is stalling is the person who benefits from the stall. And that person is Papoose. Read that again. The person who is stalling is the person who benefits from the stall. Because as long as the divorce is not final, Papoose does not have to marry his new companion. As long as the divorce is not final, he can float in the middle. He can enjoy the new arrangement without the covenant. He can play the doting boyfriend without ever having to face the weight of the vows. And Claressa Shields, the whole time, has been out here believing that the delay was about paperwork or lawyers or logistics. When in reality, the delay is about him. The delay has always been about him. And the Queen of the Bronx just told the world. That is why the champion is unraveling. That is why she is out here calling women names. That is why she is grabbing at Shenica. Because for the first time, the truth is louder than the fantasy. And she has no plan for a truth this loud. Now let me be fair. Because I always try to be fair. There is a version of this story where our boxer could have won. There is a version where she says, publicly, you know what? This has been messy. I am stepping back. I am focusing on my career. I am giving the situation the space it needs. Do you know what would have happened if she had said that? The culture would have respected it. The culture would have understood. The culture might have even come around. Because there is grace in stepping back. There is dignity in silence. But the champion did not choose the dignified move. She chose the loud move. She chose the mud. And now she has to sit in the mud she made. Meanwhile, and I want you to notice this, the Bronx legend is not spinning. She is not tweeting. She is not going to live. She said her piece on stage and walked away. That is the difference between a woman who has already lived the whole cycle and a woman who is just now discovering it exists. The queen knows what the aftermath looks like. She has seen it before. She has been in front of it, behind it, above it, under it. She knows the moves. She knows the rhythm. And she is not chasing anybody's response. Because the response is not her job. The response is the boxer's problem. And that is what makes this so lopsided. That is what makes this so uncomfortable to watch. You have one woman moving with the calm confidence of someone who has already lived the whole story. And you have another woman thrashing around trying to write a chapter that was never hers to write. It is not a fair fight. It has never been a fair fight. And every time our champion opens her mouth about Shenica, she makes the mismatch worse. Let me talk about Shenica for one more second. Because she deserves a spotlight in this. Shenica is a woman who does not go looking for smoke. Shenica is a woman who conducts herself with grace, with humor, with sharpness, and with heart. Shenica did not go on air to attack anybody. Shenica asked a question, the kind of question any decent interviewer would ask. And in doing so, she gave our boxer the exact same warning she would have given a sister, a friend, a cousin, a peer. Do not sell yourself short. Do not attach your legacy to a situation that does not respect you. Do not let a temporary romance dismantle a permanent reputation. That is what Shenica was doing. That was the whole message. And instead of receiving it, the champion turned it into a war. That is a choice, family. That is entirely a choice. And the culture is not letting it slide. The comment sections, the reaction videos, the group chats, the Twitter threads, the Instagram lives, everyone is saying the same thing. Sit down. Reset. Rebuild. Because the road she is walking is not the road that leads back to the version of her the culture used to love. And once you burn that road down, you do not always get to walk it again. Let me pause and add another dimension, because I think a lot of you in the comments are missing this. There is a whole generation of young women watching this play out in real time. Young girls who used to point at our Olympic champion and say, "That is who I want to be." Young athletes in gyms across Flint, across Michigan, across the country, who taped her posters to their walls. And what are they seeing right now? They are seeing the woman they admired reduced to a press-run bully, snarling at other black women for asking questions any professional interviewer would ask. That family is a legacy problem. That is not a news cycle. That is a permanent stain. And she is applying it to her own name with her own two hands. Now compare that to what Remy Ma has been doing this whole time. The Bronx MC has been raising kids, running podcasts, hosting shows, writing books, mentoring young female artists, doing charity work in her old neighborhood, and quietly building an empire that keeps generating income whether her ex signs the papers or not. She did not need this fight. She did not want this fight. She waited months. She kept her mouth shut through insult after insult. And when the tipping point came, when the disrespect got too big to ignore, she opened her mouth once, and it detonated the entire landscape. That is what mastery looks like. That is what someone who has already survived the worst version of this looks like. And here is a small piece I want to tuck in, because I have seen a lot of people in the comments trying to blame Fat Joe, trying to blame the culture, trying to blame everybody but the actual actors in the actual play. Fat Joe did not sign a divorce paper on this man's behalf. The culture did not slide into anybody's DMs. The community did not book any hotel rooms. The parties in this situation are the parties in this situation. And the receipts, when you follow the receipts, always point back to the same three human beings, the MC holding the microphone, the boxer holding the grudge, and the ex-husband holding the paperwork. I also want to hit on the marriage plans piece, because that is the part everybody keeps softening. The champion, according to her own public statements, has been telling anyone who will listen that a wedding is coming, that the ring is on the way, that the honeymoon location is basically picked out. And every single one of those statements was made under the assumption that the divorce would clear in time. That assumption is now dead. That assumption is buried. That assumption is not coming back. Because as of Sunday night, the whole world knows the delay is not administrative. The delay is emotional. The delay is strategic. The delay is a man buying himself time to figure out whether he actually wants what he has been telling everybody he wants. And nothing exposes a fantasy faster than the arithmetic of a wedding date that cannot land on a calendar. Now let me get into the receipts on the timeline, because I want to be very clear about how obvious the stall pattern actually is once you line the dates up side by side. Divorce filings in New York, when both parties are cooperative, can move through the docket in a matter of weeks. Even complicated ones, with children, with property, with business interests, with pre-existing management agreements, do not stretch out this long unless somebody is putting sand in the gears. Papoose has been putting sand in the gears for a while now. Every missed hearing. Every requested extension. Every quiet delay dressed up as a scheduling conflict. Every filing that gets amended and re-amended. That is not a paperwork drama. That is a strategy. And when Remy Ma stepped up to that microphone on Sunday, she quietly showed the culture the whole strategy in a single sentence. And this is where I want to bring in something a lot of the smaller commentary channels are afraid to say. This entire situation is a case study in what happens when a man wants the freedom of the exit without the accountability of the door closing behind him. Papoose is not the first man in the culture to run this play. He is not going to be the last. But the reason this version is landing so hard is because the woman on the receiving end of the play is not a random civilian. She is Remy Ma. She is a lyricist who has been in the game since before some of the boxer's fans were born. She is a woman who has stood in a courtroom, stood in a prison cell, stood on a stage, and stood in a marriage and walked out of each one of those rooms with her name still intact. So when Papoose thought he could stall the paperwork and float in the middle, he was underestimating the exact person who has spent her entire career refusing to be underestimated. Let me also say something about the way Claressa Shields has handled her Olympic legacy in the middle of all this. Because it hurts to watch. It genuinely hurts to watch. We were rooting for our champion. The whole culture was rooting for our champion. We wanted the biopic. We wanted the endorsement deals. We wanted the crossover. And she was on track to get all of it. Then she made a series of decisions that pulled her focus away from the ring and onto a man. Not on herself. Not on her craft. Not on her legacy. On a man. On a man who, and this is the part that stings, did not even have the decency to finalize the paperwork that would have made her transition into her next chapter respectable. That is what makes this so painful. Because Claressa Shields did not have to end up here. There was a version of the last 12 months where she trained. There was a version where she took interviews about her career. There was a version where the story on her feed was about titles, not about a rival. That version is not the version we got. And now every time a young girl types the name Claressa Shields into a search bar in 2026, the first thing she is going to see is not a highlight reel from the Olympics. It is going to be the mess she made on live television going after a working journalist. Now let me close this out with something plain. Because I do not want anybody in the comments to misinterpret this as a pylon. This is a wake-up call, delivered with love, delivered with clarity, and delivered with the understanding that women in this culture are always watching each other for how to be. Claressa Shields has an opportunity, right now, to sit down, to be quiet, to let the dust settle, to focus on her career, to stop swinging at women who did not swing at her, to stop trying to write the sequel to a book somebody else already finished. That is the move. That is the correct move. That is the only move that saves what is left of the story. Whether she takes that move or not, well, that is on her. But the culture will remember. The culture will remember every word, every jab, every distraction, every ugly little press-run swing at a woman who did not deserve it. And when the boxer is old and gray and looking back on this chapter, she is going to have to sit with the fact that she chose the mud when she had the entire clean road available to her. Meanwhile, Remy Ma is going to keep moving. Because that is what Remy Ma does. Papoose is going to have to answer for the stalling. Because the timeline does not lie. And Shenica, beautiful, poised, brilliant Shenica, is going to keep being the woman she has always been. Because women like Shenica do not need to raise their voice. Their whole life is the argument. So sit with all of that. Sit with the whole picture. Because this is not a rumor. This is not a spin. This is not a distraction. This is a public unraveling in slow motion, and Remy Ma just handed the culture the receipts to make sense of every single frame of it. Let me pause on one more angle before I bring this home, because I do not want you to leave this video without the sharpest version of the picture in your head. What we are watching in real time is a very old story dressed up in very new clothes. A man who used to be somebody's husband is now floating between two houses. One house was built by the woman he already left. The other house is being built by the woman he has not fully picked up yet. And instead of choosing a door, he is standing in the hallway pretending the hallway is a home. That is not a relationship. That is a holding pattern. And holding patterns always crash the same way, loudly, publicly, and in slow motion. This one is crashing right on schedule. And the sad part, the part one keep coming back to, is that the woman in the middle of the hallway did not have to be there. She had her own house. She had her own address. She had her own team of contractors. She was one of the most decorated female fighters this country has produced in a generation. She had every reason to build outward and every reason to build upward. Instead, she moved into somebody else's holding pattern and started decorating it like it was a permanent address. That is what makes this so hard for the culture to watch. Because the fall is not the fall of a stranger. It is the fall of a champion. And nobody roots for that. Nobody. One last thought before I close this thing out, because I know some of you are going to say I did not press hard enough on the ex-husband piece. So let me press it. Papoose has been walking around the culture for years, positioning himself as the emblem of a good black husband. Papoose has been on panels. Papoose has been on podcasts. Papoose has been in interviews talking about loyalty, about protection, about how a man carries a household. And every one of those speeches now has to be replayed against the paper trail Remy Ma just placed on the table. Every one of them. Because you cannot walk around calling yourself a mentor to men if your own household ledger says the numbers never added up. You cannot walk around calling yourself an example if the example is stalling a divorce, so a second woman cannot marry you. The whole brand collapses under the weight of a single sentence. And that single sentence came from Remy Ma. On a stage. On a Sunday. In front of the whole culture. With a microphone that she did not even have to raise. That is why this story has legs. That is why the numbers on this story are not slowing down. That is why every commentary channel in this space is trying to catch up to the version I just laid out for you. Because when the receipts land, everybody has to reorganize their prior takes. And a lot of channels, a lot of interviewers, a lot of little corner blogs have been carrying water for Papoose for a long time. Their credibility is now taped to his credibility. And his credibility is bleeding out on the floor. So Claressa Shields, if you are watching this, and something tells me you are, I want you to hear me clearly. The way out of this is not through Shenica. The way out is not through more press runs. The way out is not through Instagram stories borrowing bars from women you cannot out-rap. The way out is silence. The way out is training. The way out is the ring. The way out is remembering the version of you the culture fell in love with in the first place. That version is still available to you. She just has to be picked up off the floor. And Papoose, if by some miracle you are watching this, and I doubt it, but if you are, sign the papers. Sign the papers. Let this woman get on with her life. Stop weaponizing the delay. Stop weaponizing your own indecision. Because every day you stall, Remy Ma builds another wing of the empire, and every day you stall, the woman you claim to love loses another piece of herself. Neither one of those outcomes reflects well on you. Sign the papers. Drop your take in the comments. I want to hear every angle. Team Remy Ma, Team Papoose. I doubt it. Team Claressa Shields, Team Shenica, Team Leave Me Out of It. I want to know where you stand. Hit that like if you sat with me this long. Subscribe if you are new around here, because this story is not done. There is another chapter coming, and I promise you I will be right back on the microphone the second it drops. Alright, family, I'll see you on the next one.